Hey everybody, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.
Chris Peaks here today with Chris Sevier, who is a litigation attorney, I guess battling the cultural war that's going on right now. I'm just going to let you go ahead and tell a little bit about the group so I don't butcher it right here.
No, we have a group. It's called Special Forces of Liberty. When we file a lawsuit, we're proceeding under what's called de facto attorneys general. We typically do the job of the Republican attorney generals in cases and controversies that might be too politically hot for them to get involved in. For example, we might sue a public library for hosting drag queen story time. We might sue Mayor Bowser for displaying the Black Lives Matter banner on 16th Street. We might sue Joe Biden's attorney general for to challenge the constitutionality of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Or we might take on groups like Apple, Facebook, Twitter, in related to human trafficking or matters or issues dealing with trying to protect children online. And from the litigation that we file, we write bills for all 50 states, including the state of Alabama. And we write them in a way to where we know that if they're enacted, they will not be struck down and they actually will accomplish what they're trying to set out to do, if you will. They have very robust enforcement mechanisms. So we have a website at specialforcesliberty.com, and on that website under legislation by state are right now 7 bills that deal with most of the main cultural war issues. And if someone listening would go to the website and check out the bills, if they would download those bills and send them to members, especially of the House Judiciary, Senate Judiciary, House Education, Senate Education committees, and just simply say, hey, I live in the state, like the state of Alabama, for example, and I want these laws to become, these bills to become laws in our state, it would go a long, long way. And bills are all about well, go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
Oh, so I was kind of like a opposite of the ACLU then, so to speak, right?
1000%. We are the mirror. I say that all the time when I meet with state representatives. I go, we are the mirror opposite of the ACLU. But here's the difference with the distinction. We don't care about credit. We don't care about donations. We don't care about glory. We just want the state legislature and the governor to sign bills that will really stop the left. A lot of times there's a lot of pro-family groups that are very well intended, but they have no idea about things like stare decisis, the doctrine of preemption, or really how to craft laws, especially in areas where the Supreme Court has weighed into, where if they're enacted, they're actually going to not be struck down. And so that's where we come in. We really come in with pure intentions to say, to ask the guys to please enact these measures that will really stop down a lot of abusive stuff that the left has created through a lot of dishonest litigation, really.
How long's your group been, how long's this been formed?
Really since 2017, we've been working with the state legislatures. The first state rep I ever worked with was Jack Williams from the state of Alabama. He's now back as a senator. And I'd filed all these lawsuits against Google and Apple to try to get them to modify their products to protect children online and to reduce the demand for human trafficking by blocking human trafficking websites. And I took it to Jack first, Senator Williams, I should say. And said, man, what do you think of this? And he goes, this is great, but you're going to have to write a bill out of all this litigation yourself. And so I set up in that time to figure out, how to do it, legislation 101, and, really gotten the hang of it now that it's 2022 and we're still going state to state. We finally have really got it down. And it's not one area we work on. We have a bill called the Stop Woke Act, which is the way to get rid of CRT in public schools. The way we invoke Supreme Court precedent like Torcaso versus Watkins, the way we frame CRT as religious ideology, the way we weaponize taxpayer standing doctrine, the way we weaponize logical nexus doctrine. That language that we have is not shallow. It really will survive judicial review and solve the problem. We have another bill called the SMAC Act, the Social Media Accountable Censorship Act. About 26 states have run a variation of this. Last year, we were calling it the Stop Social Media Censorship Act, but after having hearings in Missouri, Louisiana, Maine, and so forth, we modify the language so we now know it's absolutely perfect. So if the states will introduce and enact that, it will absolutely survive judicial review and stop social media censorship. We have a bill called the School Establishment Clause Act. It's called SECA, and that is the bill that will get rid of boys participating in girls' sports, transgender bathroom policies. It will get rid of LGBTQ indoctrination in public schools. bills like the Fairness of Women's Sports Act, they're well intended, but they're completely preempted under decisions like Bostick, Windsor, and Obergefell. And the people that came up with that, they don't understand. They're not litigators. They don't really haven't experienced really what the doctrine of preemption is and what stare decisis is and how to get around it. So that's why we're coming to the state legislatures to say, we're not here to take your job. We're not here to just boss you around. We're here to provide you with weapons, pieces of paper with words on them, that if you will introduce and enact this, you will solve the problem to protect your constituents. And you go ahead. Sorry.
That doctrine of preemption, I'm not sure I'm familiar with that.
Okay, so yeah, this is, and by the way, most people aren't, and most legislatures aren't. And I'll go meet with a rep, and I'll say, Senator so and so, what do you do for a living? And they might say they're a farmer, or they're a funeral director, they're a business owner. Okay, I know nothing about that stuff. Okay, but I do know stuff about litigation on First Amendment topics, and then also, I'll tell you this: lawyers know just enough to be dangerous on any topic unless they personally litigated it exhaustively, not in state court, but in federal court. Okay, so just want to say that. And then, so the doctrine of preemption, this is how this works. And this is very quickly. The controlling authority in the country is the United States Constitution. That's the highest level of authority. Beneath that, you have the federal government, which is three branches: the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, the president, the executive branch, and the federal Congress. Okay, so anything that, and then below that, you have the state constitution and the three branches of the state government: the governors, the executive, the state legislature, the House and Senate, and the judicial branch, which goes up to the Supreme Court. If anything that the federal government or the state government does, any action or policy they take that conflicts with the federal Constitution, then it's unlawful. Okay. However, any law that the federal government makes that conflicts with a state law, the federal law wins out. That's called the doctrine of preemption. The group that's supposed to make federal law is the Congress, the Senate, and the House. However, the executive branch does make law through the bureaucracies and executive orders and so forth. And then the Supreme Court makes law, the federal Supreme Court, by interpreting the law, which then creates the law. So most of the social issues, the left has weaponized what's called the 14th Amendment, especially the equal protection substantive due process clauses. And they have twisted that and misused it to get the court to make rulings that has made bad law. But then the state legislatures, there's ways to get around it, but they persistently do not frame the issues correctly. And so we're here to help them frame it so where you can have Trump appointees, legitimately get rid of a lot of this bad precedent, if you will. It's basically all we're doing. It's kind of like cracking a code. That's what it's like. It's like speaking another language. But this stuff is real. These federal laws are real. These doctrines are real. And so we're here to help the members get from A to B, if you will. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes total sense. Hey, you first off about human trafficking. I hear that often, but I never really thought about it. How big is a problem then? I mean, is this something that goes on that we just don't really know about or we don't pay attention to enough?
Well, it's always shifting and changing and modifying. It's just like pornography too, or obscenity as well. It's all just this big cabal of like unhealthy practices that lead to all these kind of secondary harmful effects. In terms of the United States, human trafficking is there, but prostitution is more prevalent, but there's a fine line between the two. I mean, prostitution can very easily turn into human trafficking quickly. Sure. And I had the opportunity to work with special forces and FBI on extractions for a bit. I was training to do some of those missions after I came back from Iraq. But in doing the training, I really came to terms with the fact that we can't prosecute our way out of that problem. What we really need to do, why we have an explosion in human trafficking is because of the internet, because of these websites that facilitate it. And we always say to the members of the legislative branch that sex trafficking is gone from the street corner to the smartphone. So the legislation we have that I think Representative Woods from Alabama might be running this session is called SOCA, the Save Our Children Act. And it's a bill that it regulates internet-enabled devices, retailers of internet-enabled devices, and tells them that when they sell their laptop, cell phones, and the ISP services to their consumers, that those retailers are going to be required to sell their products with a filter that blocks by default websites that are known to facilitate human trafficking and prostitution, and websites that display X-rated material that would be injurious to children. And if the consumer is an adult and they want to have access to adult content like that, they can. They have to show proof of ID to the retailer. We're giving the retailer permission to charge their own separate filter deactivation fee for profit. And the internet will be just like it is right now. So here's an example of why I can take a bill like that to the state reps and say, you need to run our version, because I would have talking points in the bill, like Ashcroft versus the ACLU, which was the Supreme Court decision where the federal Supreme Court struck down Congress's law called the Communications Decency Act. Another one's called the Child Online Privacy Protection Act. That was the federal Congress's attempt to deal with, X-rated websites online that were hurting children. And in that decision, the Supreme Court, while they struck down a federal law, they literally said the legislative branch may undoubtedly act to encourage the use of filters, and it can encourage parents to use filters, and the tech companies to develop better filter technology. So that's the Supreme Court informing the legislative branch that if you want to solve this problem, you need to have filter legislation that's narrowly tailored. And so, we've then put that to paper to take it to the legislature, say the Supreme Court is saying that this is good to go in this case. And here's one other example of, why litigation helps if you're going to really try to win these different fights. We cite a case called Ginsburg versus New York, and that was a federal Supreme Court decision where they upheld what's called the display statute. The display statute is a statute that says if you have a gas station or a 7-Eleven or something, you can sell Playboys and Hustlers, but the gas station is required to put the X-rated material behind a blinder rack, a filter that can only be removed if the consumer is an adult. They show proof of ID and they pay for it. Now, after that's been litigated exhaustively, the Supreme Court found that state statute would survive what's called First Amendment heightened scrutiny as the least restrictive means. And so what does all that mean? It's all this tricky language and this tricky maneuvering. Get something to work, you really want to solve a problem, you have to thread these different needles in. You have to be able to invoke that authority. And so that's what we do. And we try to make it as simple as possible. A lot of our bills, we have legislative findings at the beginning of them, which lays out the roadmap of all the authority that we're relying on. It's basically the talking points. Is the thing that the Attorney General can sink their teeth in to defend the bill. And then below that, you have the actual language. And so, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You mentioned a while ago drag queen story time. I remember when that first popped up. Why is that being pushed on kindergartners?
I mean, we frame LGBTQ matters as a matter of religion. All the arguments we ever make, we're in court and so forth, we're like, Your Honor, we're not here to prove or disprove whether or not a gay gene exists, even though we have testimonials from thousands of ex-gays and hundreds of former transvestites. We're not here to prove or disprove it. We're saying it's not proven, therefore it's a matter of religion. And because it's a matter of religion, two things automatically get invoked: the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, as well as the Free Exercise Clause. The Establishment Clause is the part of the Constitution that says separation in church and state. The government cannot act to establish a national religion. And the Free Exercise Clause is to say, it doesn't matter how dumb a religion is, people have the right to believe in it. However, the practices can be regulated if they promote licentiousness, which LGBTQ stuff does, or if it's an attempt to justify practices that are inconsistent with the peace and safety of the state. So what we do in all our cases is we say that LGBT ideology, homosexuality, sexual orientation, gender identity, it's a doctrine, it's a dogma, it's a worldview that's inseparably linked to what's called the religion of secular humanism. The Supreme Court of the United States found in case starting in Torcaso versus Watkins that secular humanism is a religion for the purpose of the First Amendment. So once again, because it's basically a series of unproven faith-based assumptions and naked assertions that are implicitly religious and inseparably linked to that worldview, that has, an ultimate concern, they're organized, they have their own, instead of having the cross or the 10 Commandments, they have the rainbow-colored flag and so forth. They have their own incantations and rules and so forth, which they can have, but the government cannot endorse it. So we'll be in court and I'm like, Judge, listen, they can have drag queen story time at the Starbucks or at someone's house, but they can't have it at the public library at the taxpayer's expense. Just like we can't, I'm a Christian, but I don't want us to have a Christian Bible study for children in the public library either. And so when you formulate something as religion, which it is, that what that does is it's the one area of the law that allows taxpayers to file suit, where they have standing under what's called Taxpayer Doctrine, to be able to sue, where they can, we put in all our bills that they can recover attorney's fees so that Christian lawyers would have to actually represent them, and they can get injunctive relief. So, I mean, we've been larding the court record with all kinds of lawsuits on this. We've been suing congressmen who are Democrats for displaying the gay pride flag in the halls of Congress in a way that's way too, like, it kind of creates the impression that the government's endorsing this in general instead of a personal endorsement. Or we've got a lawsuit against HHS right now in federal district court in DC before this really good Trump appointed judge, very good, solid guy. And we're basically saying that HHS cannot force doctors to perform transgender surgery against their conscience because those policies are designed to promote the religion of secular humanism. They excessively entangle the government with religion of secular humanism. So when I go see state reps that, they want to get rid of the LGBTQ stuff, everything I'm saying, it's like deer in headlights. They have no idea about any of this stuff. And so I'm looking at them going, here's the language, just get it drafted, just run it, just get it passed through. And if you do that, it will survive in court and you'll actually get rid of the problem. But so, yeah.
This LGBTQ, it seems like it's just become more and more broad because when I look at it, I don't really see trans as gay. That's not like a whole different thing to me. I mean, people who are, you can't change your sex like you can't change your color. I mean, remember that girl that was head of the NAACP a couple years ago that, or she was head of the NAACP, said she was black, identified as being black. Mm-hmm. Well, I identify as a 65-year-old retired CEO, so I mean, I should get a pension, right?
Right. Yeah. So you mean you can self-identification is, we're always saying you have the right to self-identify as anything you want to, a chicken sandwich, whatever you want. But the government cannot recognize or endorse it because for the government to recognize something that's that controversial, something that's that clearly unproven and more likely than not implausible, it is a violation of the principles of separation of church and state. I mean, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment was never designed just to prohibit the government from respecting the doctrines of institutionalized religion like Christianity. It was designed, if not more so, to stop the government from embracing what amounts to the majority of the Democrat Party's platform, which is just this huge effort to entangle our government with a religious worldview that naturally produces feelings of shame and inadequacy in the hopes that like the government's endorsement, that shame and inadequacy will go away, which it never does. And so that's basically all it is. It's pretty absurd. And again, people can believe in it if they want to. I'm not, I don't want to legislate morality in that. I want people to freely choose the path they want to go down to. But I certainly don't want the left taking our government and coercively imposing their religious worldview on the rest of us, especially given the fact that it promotes licentiousness. It's self-evidently immoral. And it's subversive to human flourishing. It's especially harmful to people that actually believe in it. So,
What I'm afraid of is where's it going to stop them? Are they going to incorporate pedophilia in this?
Sure. I
mean, yeah. Saying that, this is normal for them. Like, where does it end?
There's a slippery slope of the heart that can take place very easily. For example, when we're fighting, people look at us and they go, we like you fighting prostitution and human trafficking. We don't like your efforts to regulate pornography online. And I'm sitting there going, the majority of the Johns that we deal with who've been arrested for that crime, they started by like getting into pornography or something and then got to something more hardcore form and then started hiring prostitutes and then we're flying to Thailand and like doing things with children. So there's a slippery slope of the heart. So when I'm in court, a lot of times or I'm before a hearing, before chairman of a committee, and I'm just sitting there going, look, there's some doors in life that are better left unopened. And we should make it, the law should be crafted in a way to makes it harder to open, discourages people from opening certain doors that would lead to conduct that would really hurt them and other people. So it's, so you're right. There is, with all that other licentious stuff, I mean, it's really the end result of the depraved mind and it can get really bad. So the legislature has a duty to channel, because I'm always saying, sex is good, God made it, but sex is always about content and context. And, in the healthy context, I would submit would be between a man and a woman in a committed relationship. And the government should be used to get their citizens to channel their sexual energy in that format. And so that's all, So that's basically what the laws do that we're working on. They basically try to get guys and girls to come together, to not do anything gay, to not hire a prostitute, to not abort their baby, to not, to not let that couple get beat up because they think that abortion's wrong or something online, so forth. So we have all the laws we have are designed to make it easier to cultivate intimacy between men and women. That's it. So
terms today, it seems like there's a new one that comes out every day. I remember the when I first heard cis man, I thought I was being insulted, and they said, "No, you identify as the gender you was born with." I said, "I didn't need a term to tell me that." And
Right.
arguing with somebody, and he said, "You don't know what it's like raising a gender fluid child." And I said, "That's what I'm talking about right there. I don't even know what that means." And
Right.
when did all this? This had the last couple of years. All these terms just popped up like this.
Well, it's, basically starting in 1990. So basically, the big fight that's been going on is America a Christian nation or are we a secular humanist nation? That's the fight, okay? So I'm in court all the time going, Your Honor, the Supreme Court found in Holy Cross versus Trinity that America is a Christian nation. There you have it. They laid it out there. But then in 1992, Justice Kennedy in Planned Parenthood versus Casey said, at the heart of liberty is a man's ability to define his own meaning of the universe, which can be boiled down to the principle, which basically is saying we're a moral relativist, secular humanist, atheistic nation. And that whole principle can be boiled down to the idea that to each their own, which is what the sign of our Buchenwald concentration camp read. So clearly we're not that. But basically starting in, so you have Dred Scott case from the 1800s, which is a case that says black people are not human enough to be able to vote. That was a Democrat-backed, atheist in charge decision that was rendered. They weaponized the 14th Amendment, equal protection and substantive due process clause to come up with that terrible decision. And then in the 1970s, you had Roe versus Wade, same thing. The left weaponized the 14th Amendment, stretched it in ways it's not designed to be used, and got rid of anything trying to ban and regulate abortion at a time certain. And then in 2015, you have Obergefell. Same weapon tactic, misusing the 14th Amendment, framing things in a way that's really religion, really governed by the First Amendment Establishment Clause, and creating some narrative under the wrong constitutional prescription. And so when the government in 2015 endorsed, the Obergefell, the gay marriage decision, it has opened the floodgates for all kinds of horrors to follow. In the wake of Obergefell, there hasn't been a land rush on gay marriage. There's been a major land rush on Christian persecution. There has been a massive land rush on self-identified homosexuals, self-identified transvestites, and secular humanists to infiltrate elementary schools for the sole purpose of targeting children to indoctrinate them to that religious worldview with a government stamp of approval. And so it's really undermined the legitimacy of the judicial branch, I think. But the federal courts aren't the final say on the Constitution, as Justice Sotomayor recently said in oral argument of Dobbs versus Jackson. So what we're doing is going to the state legislature with bills that craft these topics under the correct and controlling constitutional prescription. And we've done it not for just Alabama, but for all 50 states. And so we're just going from state to state to state to meet with the members, and we're asking the local public to please go to the website, download the language, email it to those members of the House and Senate, and just say, hey, listen, I live here. I want you to take a look at this. I want you to run this. I want you to pass this bill in our state. So
I'd like to get your opinion on something. The Democratic Party is what made me a conservative Republican because they're just so out of touch. What do you think's happened to them over the last 30 or 40 years? Because somebody like Bill Clinton today would be called a rhino. I mean, he wouldn't even get the Democratic on.
100%. I deal with them, and I have tons of friends that are Democrats. They can be fun, that's for sure. And I just, a lot of them when I'm in a blue state like a Minnesota or somewhere, or New Jersey, and I'll be sitting behind the scenes with them talking to them. I'm like, what do you guys really want to do? And basically, you've got the power. Congratulations. Now, what are you going to do with it? It's kind of like Biden's got the power on the federal level, right? They got Congress and they have the presidency. But what are they doing? A lot of times they really don't know what to do, other than they're just like, well, we want more policies that will give us more power. That's basically what drives them. And another thing is I really think that they're very much like a cult. I think that they have this, they are looking for purpose. They're looking for meaning. And they really want to turn the government into their own private church, which they're not allowed to do. And, I do think there's hope that they could come back from the edge, but it's almost like sometimes people have to come to their end. It's like an addict, right? They have to hit rock bottom before they come out of it. But the best thing we can do is get Christian, conservative, non-rhinos elected to office. They can have discernment that would enact the kind of policies that groups like ours are making, that are designed to restore the rule of law and promote human flourishing. That would kind of pull us back from the brink. I definitely think there's a lot of Democrats I work with who are totally sick of all the LGBTQ crap. They're totally sick of all the racism, weaponizing racism and division. And but then there's some that are just, I just think they're really not living in the same reality. you know.
I mean, yeah, when you look back at 2016 with Hillary Clinton, she had to put down a rebellion, in her own party. She was the conservative wing of, who would have thought? And when you look at a lot of her policies, compared to the rest of the Democratic Party, she's almost out of touch with all of them. I mean,
Sure, yeah.
They have no what do they call them? Progressives wing of the party. They're taking over, and they're going to be, to me, so out of touch with mainstream America. Hopefully, they'll be done for a while.
Well, my thing about the progressives is that they're willing to fight for something. That's for sure. They're not squish. They believe in something, then they're going 150 miles an hour in that direction. And people like to see that kind of leadership. However, the direction they're going in is asinine and disastrous. It's really absurd in every way. But what we need on our side is Republican Christian types that will fight in the other way and really be willing to fight. I look at a lot of these guys and I'm like, don't think you're going to be here forever. I can't tell you how many state reps and senators that I was working with from 2017 to now that are dead, or that have, something happened and they're gone, And so I'm just sitting there going, while you have the power, for Christ's sakes, we need to use it to stop a lot of this leftist stuff from going on, because, they're coming for you, basically, as Trump would say. He's the thing standing in between them. And, we have the weapons to shut a lot of them down. And so what we need responsiveness, and we need people, to get involved. And so, yeah, it takes a lot of different elements coming together to really stop it. But really, people just moving out in faith to try to do good can go a long way.
Well, great, Chris. That's all the questions I've got for you with that. Is there anything else you want to add to it?
I mean, the biggest thing is, I'm just a Christian who's operating in an area of expertise that I know, which is I just was trained to do law. And from litigation, we do have bills on all the culture war topics. Well, there's at least 7. We'll have another round of 7 probably by 2024. But I just ask anyone listening to this to go to specialforcesliberty.com, go under legislation by their state, download the bills. I want them to read it themselves the best they can. See if they can make their way through it. There's some videos we have that kind of explain the spirit of the bills, try to break it down so it's more simple to understand. But if they would do that, and if they like it, if they would take the proactive step of reaching out to their state representatives, their state Senate members, especially on the judiciary or House or education committees, but it could be any of them really. If they would just email them to them and ask them to say, listen, I live in this state, I vote in this state, I want you to pass these bills. If they would just do that, then those guys have legal counsel and some advisors that can look at it, and they might come back and say, absolutely, that would be great. Because, our team doing this, we only can live and vote in one state. And although we're working all over the place, it's very meaningful if it's coming from people in the individual states, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you said y'all were doing this in all 50 states. So
We are.
How hard is it? Maybe this like going into Massachusetts and Washington and Oregon, filing these lawsuits.
Well, so we had Representative Leaf in Oregon who was carrying a bunch of things for us, but he died of cancer this year. We have Representative Clippard, former state trooper. He's a state trooper actually, and he's a colonel in the military. And he'll carry he's carried some stuff for us, especially on abortion funding issues in Washington. Massachusetts is a total nightmare, but we have states like Rhode Island, for example, where we have Representative Price, former Marine, and I've asked Price will probably carry all 7 bills. Or we have someone like in Maine, we have Representative Heidi Sampson. She's great. I think she carried 5 things for us last year. So we have people in those states that are willing to fight. And basically, the thing is the guys, and this is probably good for you to hear. The people from Alabama understand this. In the blue states, like where you have a state like Hawaii or Rhode Island, let's take Rhode Island, where they have 9 Republicans total in the House. That's it, okay? The rest are all blue. All right, those Republicans love the bills that we have because they weaponize the federal Constitution and tell the state legislature, their fellow colleagues, it doesn't matter that the other side has power. They need to, pass the bills that we're presenting because it's what the federal Constitution requires. And it's framed right and everything's right. But of course, the blue guys up there just say, well, we don't care what the Constitution says. We're just going to continue to ignore it. We'll take the same bills to Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas, where we have a supermajority of red. But because the bills are complex, they're not just really simple and short and everything. They continually, in the red states, run these very simple and short bills that, number one, are unconstitutional. Number two, they really don't have robust enforcement mechanisms. So at least when I get the blue states to just run the bills, I can go screaming back to Alabama and say, for Christ's sakes, we need you guys to run the bills like they're doing in the blue states. And so it's helpful to have, as many states as possible pushing the measures, because they do simply reflect what the federal and state constitutions for the state require. So, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I'll get this posted and get an article up soon, man.
All right, man. Good talking with you.
Okay, thanks, man. This was really